Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Brianna Keilar in for Jake Tapper. Before it was a UN shelter, it was a school. And now it's just one more scene of human suffering in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The fog of war is thick in Gaza right now. A UN spokesman in Jerusalem says that it's still unclear which side is responsible for this nightmare. But that same UN spokesman says both Hamas and the Israeli military knew, quote, exactly where this school was. Here's what we can confirm. Innocent lives were lost. Scores were injured, and this conflict is still nowhere near over. I want to bring in Farhan Haq right now. He's the deputy spokesman for the UN Secretary General. Farhan, thanks so much for being with us. And part of the issue with this is we can't really tell who is responsible at this point. It's actually the IDF has said that various actions may have caused this attack, and a misfired rocket is one possibility that it's investigating. This is actually a tweet that they've put out implicating Hamas. They said Hamas fired from a populated area near a UN shelter and prevented civilians from evacuating after we sent warnings.
Israeli officials say they did not target a United Nations school in Gaza today. Gaza residents were using the school as a shelter when it was hit by several explosions. Palestinian officials blame the Israeli military. They say Israeli shells hit the school in Beit Hanun. The Israelis say they are investigating the attack and suggested errant shots by Hamas fighters may have caused the explosions. Officials say at least 15 people were killed. Dozens more were wounded. Al Jazeera's Stephanie Decker has more now from Gaza.
They should have been safe. Everyone here had left their homes to the supposed safety of a makeshift UN shelter.
All our children are in the school, and us too. Go and see. They shelled us with rockets. They are children's body parts. There is no safety. We have no security anywhere.
Beit Hanun is close to the border with Israel, and it's been an area that's been hit hard. When we drove here, there was heavy shelling in the area.
They told us we should evacuate this school because Israel will hit it. The civilians should leave. Okay, we will leave. How can we leave? Every family with 8, 9, 10 children, they say will bring us buses. We kept waiting for the buses. We got our luggage and we sat on the playground waiting. Then the shells fell on us.
When we drove here, there was heavy shelling in the area.
They told us we should evacuate this school because Israel will hit it. We should evacuate this school because Israel will hit it. The civilians should leave. Okay, we will leave. How can we leave? Every family with 8, 9, 10 children, they say will bring us buses. We kept waiting for the buses. We got our luggage and we sat on the playground waiting. Then the shells fell on us.
These girls have just been brought into the hospital. There is a steady stream of people arriving here, and they're absolute scenes of chaos and devastation. And the people here are asking the question, why does Israel target a UN school that they know shelters civilians who have already had to flee their homes? You can see people are extremely upset because they say Israel knew this was a shelter for those who already had to flee the areas because of Israel's military campaigns.
Israel says it may have been a rocket fired from one of the armed groups here that fell short. But no one believes that here.
Before the buses came, the Israelis shelled the school.
The UN spokesman told us the UN had given the Israeli army the exact location of this school, all of their schools, and yet 4 have been hit in the last 4 days.
Most of the injuries are critical injuries. They are being operated on. Others we had to send to another hospital. This is a crime. What can we do? This is a crime against humanity.
Mr. Ambassador, welcome back. And let me just begin with the crux of your piece, that you say Hamas has this calculated media strategy to use the international media to show images of civilian suffering. But isn't that part of the story?
Well, good to be with you, Brooke. Over the last almost now 2 weeks that the operation has been conducted between Israel and Hamas on the Gaza Strip, audiences throughout the world have watched television, have seen hundreds of hours of airtime devoted to Palestinian casualties. Now, casualties on both sides, Palestinians and Israelis, are a tragedy. But the focus on the Palestinian casualties without context serves a Hamas media strategy. And that strategy is to depict Israel as a discriminate killer, as callous, and ultimately to arouse public opinion throughout the world, put pressure on governments to go to the UN and get Israel condemned for war crimes so that Israel can't defend itself while Hamas fires rockets at Israel. And it's a strategy that Hamas has used again and again and again. And if you go back and look at those hundreds of hours, you'd have to look very, very carefully, Brooke, to see if they've ever mentioned that Israel has taken extraordinary efforts to get Palestinian civilians to leave the combat areas, warning them with telephone calls and text messages. See if those reports have mentioned that hundreds and hundreds of rockets have been fired out of those neighborhoods, that tunnels have been dug under those neighborhoods.
What are you hearing on where the responsibility lies here?
Yes, Brianna, we're still trying to get details, as you can imagine. And of course, we also have to deal with the large number of dead and wounded inside the school. What is clear is that our schools, our facilities of the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, are clearly marked. We've given out the coordinates for those schools. In this case, this was one of those that is sheltering Palestinian refugees from the fighting in Gaza. Right now, there's more than 140,000 refugees or people displaced by the conflict in Gaza who have taken refuge in our schools. More than 80 of the UNRWA schools are being used for these purposes. And we've made clear where those schools are and the fact that there are civilians in them. So they shouldn't have been attacked by anyone. And if there was any military activity, there shouldn't have been any military activity near those schools either. But whether or not there was activity nearby would not excuse anyone firing at the schools. We've been very worried about the safety of these facilities. The Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, warned the Security Council just 2 days ago about his worries that our facilities could be struck. And now here we are 2 days later, and this is a horrible attack, and we'll need to find out who did this and what happened.
Do you know, apparently Israel is saying that Hamas has been basically hiding among civilians, that they hide among the innocent in this case. Do you know if that happened with this shelter?
At this stage, we have no reason to believe that the shelter had anything other than civilians. The people from the Relief and Works Agency have tried to make sure that that their areas are kept free of any type of militant activity. Of course, we would still need to get more details, but regardless of what was happening in and around the area, the bottom line remains that school should never have been hit. And you can see a reason why. The casualties are overwhelmingly going to be civilians who are just seeking shelter, seeking a safe area in the midst of conflict.
And